Hello and welcome to the third part of our PowerShell course. And today we are going to talk about the variable scopes, about arrays, and about a bit advanced use of the arrays. So we'll begin with what we stopped in the second part, or at least what we covered in the second part. We are creating the variable, as you can see, and we are assigning it a string value, Joe, which is the name of the user. Now let's try to get members, or GM, of that variable, and see that it's the type of system string. So everything is quite obvious. The types in PowerShell are dynamic. So if you are assigning to a new variable numeric value, it will be a numeric type of variable, so you will be able to perform some very unique actions according to that type of variable. And if you are assigning a string, the variable becomes a string. So I said becomes, which means that variables change types depending from the value that you are assigning to them. It's a default feature of PowerShell, but of course it can be overridden. Now let's take a look at this particular variable. We have just created it, and we created it with assigning it a value of Joe. And now, as you can see, since it became the type of system string, it contains a lot of methods and some properties which are unique to the string, like the length and trim and split and replace, remove, and so on. Now, what will happen if we will assign something else to that variable? And by something else I mean not string, like just 10, not 10 in quote marks, but just 10. Let's take a look what happened to that variable. It became integer, 32-bit integer. So what it is, it's a number, and what's more important, as you can see, we had some methods before, just one comment before. We had methods like split, replace, remove, and so on, but now we don't. So if in your script you are taking some data of unknown nature, or you suppose that will be string, and you are assigning that string to your variable, and later you are trying to do something like something unique to that type of the variable, like you are starting working with the string, but before you just assigned a numeric value, the error will happen, because numbers don't support things like replace or split. So how to override it? Yeah, as you can see, absolutely different methods. So how to override it? The explicit way to override the type of the variable is to explicitly type it. And you can do it like this. The square brackets, and then the name of your variable, and then you just assign some value. So yeah, at this point we are assigning a string value of Joe, but we also define that this will be a string and nothing else. So now when we are getting the members of that variable, what we have and what we see is just a normal array of methods for a system string type of object. And now let's try to assign it a numeric value. And what just happened, PowerShell knows that we explicitly set this variable to string, and it converts 10 to string before assigning it to that variable. So that means that even if we assign it a numeric value, it stays the string. So now this str variable, as you can see, is a string. And this also means that you cannot perform numeric operations to that value of 10. So if you are in a normal script assigning 10 to a variable, the variable becomes numeric. But if it has explicit type like string, then if you are trying to do something like this, you will get concatenation instead of addition. So be careful and watch over your scripts and see what each line should do. It's much easier to make mistakes in your PowerShell script because of the human error. Now what we are going to review is what is stored in the variables. What is stored in variables and how it is stored. As you know, the variable stores the object because PowerShell is object-oriented scripting language and the environment. So what is stored inside of that variable is an object. And what it means for you? It means that it's static. So if you assigned something to that variable, like information about the object in your system, something volatile, like for example, in this case, we created the variable now and assigned to it the result of the getDate function, which returns the current date and time. So that now variable contains the date and time of the moment when we assigned the value. The variable now doesn't contain only the current date and time. However, this object might have some dynamic properties, dynamic methods. It's active, it's an object. So we will review it a few minutes later. Sometimes you might think that your object represents something that is non-static, that is retrieving the command that you used during the assignment. Well, it's not so, but still it can have some active elements. Now let's try to get members, and the object that we've had, that we've just created, was of the type date time. It has some unique methods and properties for the date time, like add days or to local time, to file time, and so on. Day of week, day of year. Let's just try to get some of them, like day of week. If you press tab, you can browse the methods and properties. Okay, so it's Thursday. However, if this variable will be stored for a few days, it will still contain the same date, so it will say Thursday. To illustrate that behavior, let's create another variable, and it will contain the result of the GetProcess command. GetProcess, where the name of that process, as you can see, the $_ means the current object. So where the name of that process equals PowerShell. So it's like the only application that is running, and in which I'm sure that I have this process. let's review what we have in that PS start variable. And as you can see, it's just information about that object. And it contains information like CPU, how much processor time is used by that process. And this information is not static. The object contains logic to retrieve that information for us. However, it doesn't mean that if we will make changes to that process, or if that process will be killed, it will disappear from that variable. Absolutely not. So, to illustrate that, I run the Notepad and create the variable Notepads. Absolutely the same thing as the PS start variable, except that it will retrieve the name, the information about the processes of the Notepad. For obvious reasons, I don't do it with PowerShell. So, the Notepads now contains the information about the Notepad process. We have the ID, we have CPU, which is the same for both calls, so perhaps we will need to do something with that process. Okay, so CPU changed. So as you can see, that information is dynamic. Okay, let's close it. So there is no such process anymore. It was killed. But we still have that information except for the dynamic one. So we don't have information about CPU because it doesn't use CPU, because this process doesn't exist. Now imagine the situation that we would try to kill that process, non-existent process. We would obviously get error. So, for example, if you in your script you are creating a list of processes or files or whatever else volatile objects that could disappear during the for each iteration, always check whether you still have that object. So if object exists, do something with it. If it doesn't, just skip it and go to another object. So as you may notice, I ran another Notepad. So obviously it has other ID of the process, and in this variable of Notepads I don't have information about it for obvious reason. During the assignment of value for that variable, I didn't have that process running. So as you can see, the ID of the process are different. So what can we say? We can say that in a matter of a few seconds the content of the variable became irrelevant. So let's return to our PS start, the information about the PowerShell process, quite old information. Let's get members of it. As you can see, you can do a lot of things with the processes. And as you may notice, there are properties and there are script property. The script property is another object which could be which could contain the script. And also you see here the part of the script which is contained in this property. So your objects may contain other scripts inside as active parts, and that's the beauty of PowerShell. We'll create such objects later which will contain scripts inside. So it contains a thing like start time. It's a normal property, quite static. So PS start time, and let's see. It contains the information when this this process was started. Now let's imagine the situation that you want to restart all the processes that are too old. Then you need to do something like this. You are getting the current time and calculating the difference. And what we see here is 7 minutes and 38 seconds. Everything is okay except that this information is wrong, because we did a lot of stuff since we created the now variable. So as you can see, if we are running getDate and the now variable contains the result of getDate, we get absolutely different results. Just 12 minutes difference. Since not all of your scripts will run immediately, perhaps you will have some complex scripts, maybe even those that will run continuously in your memory. What is important to consider is that sometimes you don't need to store something in variables, but instead you can use something like anonymous objects, which is just the result of some functions which don't have name, which you cannot use anywhere in other strings in other lines of your script. So in this case we are using the getDate in round squares, and this will create the object of date time, will contain the result of the getDate, and we are calculating the difference with PS start time. So as you can see, this data is real, it's dynamic, unlike the now variable. So when you need the current date, perhaps it's better to use the command getDate instead of storing it somewhere in variable. But of course, it's not only because it's not only about the date time. This could also be about Active Directory users. Not always, but sometimes. For example, when there is a chance that user will be locked or unlocked and so on, so they may have some properties that you would like to retrieve, and you wanted them to be as fresh as possible. Again, it depends from the model of how your script is running. If it's continuously running, then perhaps it will need to refresh the data. So that was about the variables. Now let's talk about the arrays. Array is a collection of objects. It could contain objects of any type, like numbers, strings, any other objects, files, register entries. Usually when you are retrieving the collection of objects, like again users from Active Directory, you get them as array. And there are some things you should know about arrays, and there are some additional tricks. And also there are some differences, even if you know some programming languages like C#, there are some differences in how PowerShell is working with arrays. So let's begin with creating the very simple array. In this case we are creating array with numbers iterating from 2 to 10, so it will contain numbers like 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 10. And this particular example you could use, for example, when you are building the list of years available for users to select as their as part of their birthday. So for example, you don't want to include the 19th century, you want only to get all years from a particular year to another particular year. So in that case you can easily create the array and check with that array whether the year was correct. So we created this array and let's see what we've got. It's a pirate array, so we called it R. It starts from 2, it ends with 10, and if you are not familiar with arrays, important thing for you to know is that arrays always begin from the 0 index. So the first element of the array has the index of 0. I don't know about all programming languages, but in all programming languages that I know, all arrays always begin from the 0. However, in PowerShell, there is another thing about arrays, is that they may have 2 indexes. Each element in the array may have 2 indexes, but more about it later. So, if we want to get 2 from this array, the first element of array, we will get it by index 0. So the first element is index 0, and then index will go 1, 2, 3 and so on, and up to 8. So you can see the array count states 9, but that's the amount of elements, it's not the maximum index. So the maximum index will be 8 in this particular case. So we are retrieving with the element with index 0, we get result 2, and you can see it's the first element of the array. To get 3, we will get element with the index 1. So here it is. The second element, which is 3, has the index of 1. I know it sounds awful that the element 3 has the index of 1 and is the second element of the array. Okay, so now you got it, and now take a look what will happen if we will try to get the array with non-existent index. We don't get exception. In other programming languages, most likely we will get exception, like everything would fail. In this particular case, we've got null, nothing. So PowerShell is forgiving in this particular case. So PowerShell is not created mainly for developers, because programming languages for developers are not forgiving. They will raise exception on every sneeze you make in the code, in every very stupid error. In this particular case it is. Now, I said that all elements may have okay, now we will add another element, so the count will be 10. It's very easy to add something to array. It's the same as to a number, plus equals 12, and we have a new element. So what I wanted to show is that every element in the array has 2 indexes in PowerShell. One is positive, which means to the right of the first element, of the element with the index 0, and it may have negative, actually it does have negative index to the left from the first element, which means that you have the first element with the index of 0, the next to the right will be element with the index of 1, but the last element of the array, in this case it's 12, the last element we've added to that array, which is 12, it also has the index of -1, which would be if we would go left from the first element. So when you're going left or down from the first element, you go to the end of array. So it's like a circle. You're moving in circles in array. So in this particular case, we are getting a few numbers from array, and we are starting from -3 and we'll go to -1. So basically that means that we are getting our last 3 elements of array. We are just going from another side. Absolutely the same would be if we would get them by their positive IDs, which in this particular case would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, it would be 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, obviously we have a count of 10. No, if we have a count of 10, then that would be IDs 9, 8, and 7. So the array command, that retrieval command that we are doing at the moment, will get elements from the end of the array, except that there is no end, it's a circle. So yeah, we get the last 3 elements, 9, 10, and 12. Let's get a bit more. Now we got also 8. This could be useful when you're doing paging, for example. Now let's imagine the situation that you have a few business applications like CRM system or eShop system, whatever, and it allows to create user profiles, and then you need to create these user profiles in other application, like in Active Directory, like in Exchange server, wherever you want, and you want to do that with PowerShell script. The systems are not interconnected, so they cannot exchange data with each other automatically, and your first system only can create the text file, which will have all the information line by line, not necessarily comma separated value files. In this particular case, we will create just a file with a list of surnames and names, and they will be separated by space. So we will create it as a text file, and we'll create it in the same directory that is current folder here in PowerShell. Okay. As you can see, surname, name, or name surname, it doesn't matter in this case. They are just dogs and cats. So we are in this D labs. Let's check whether we have this text file. Yes, we do. And we are creating the array, and with the command get content, and we'll get content from that text file. And let's see what we've got. We've got that array, which contains 4 strings. These strings are not separated. Each string is just like you see. So if it's a list of countries or currencies, you don't need any separation, and you can load that list by one simple command to load them into array. Now, as you can see, the array has the base type of system array, and it contains a lot of objects. So objects of any type, not necessarily strings. It could be registry entries, Active Directory, profiles, and so on. Whatever your command could return. In case of getContent, that would be strings. So let's do it a bit hardcore, and let's create the array which would get content from that text file. But not only that, for each line that will be loaded from that text file, so we started the script in this case. When you're starting the curly brace, PowerShell expects you to continue. So we are continuing our script. So we are introducing the object name. Take a look at this symbol, the symbol @ which means we are creating object. And when we are creating object, it means that it could have additional properties. And in this particular case, we want to create the profile of someone who has first name and last name, which means we are creating object which would contain the first name and the last name. Quite obvious. So the hardest part here is the syntax. It will be hard for you for the first 1 or 2 uses. After that you will get used to that. And in fact, it's not hard. So we are creating object for each line that is loaded from the text file. And what we are going to do next, we will create 2 properties of that object. One will be first, which is the first name, and after comma the second property, and they both will be the result of the, take a look, the $_ means the current object, which is the line that is loaded from text file, and split is the method of the string, because every line is a string. So this line has the method split, and by default, as you can see, we have no parameters in the in these braces. By default, it will split by space, so we don't need to provide any additional parameters. So we created 2 properties, first and last, and they will be filled by result of the split method of that string that is loaded from the text file. So obviously the first column is first name, then second column is last, which is last name. And we just created that object, but we also want to display it. So we will type name, and that's it. Now we close the curly brace, so you can review this whole script, just a long command line. So we retrieved that array, and what do we get here? Doesn't look understandable enough, because what you see here is the name of the property and the value, but they don't look separated. In fact, there are 8 lines, but there are 4 objects, only 4 objects, because the first last and the second first, the first and second lines belong to one object. His last name is Dog, his first name is Otis. the second object, his last name is Dog, his first name is Oscar. So when we are just retrieving the array without filtering, without any additional filtering of the result, we may get something that wouldn't be intuitive or intuitively understandable from the first sight. So let's yeah, as you can see, just for objects. Let's see what is the first object of that array, the first element with the index 0. As you can see, we got the name and the surname, the first name, the last name, and that's for every one of them. So we could use them for each loop and do something with them. And the first is just and the last are just properties, so you can retrieve them as well and use them as objects. And now let's try to filter them out. Like, for example, in real life, you could have a list of users with their departments, and these departments could have some sort of masks that would allow you to select a few departments with one mask, or maybe you don't need a mask, you just want to select all users from one department. Or maybe you need to select all users whose surname starts with A. So, just like in first two series, you see that we can filter the results, and in this particular case we are filtering and getting from that existing array only objects where the property first, which is the first name, like is when we are comparing string to a mask, and the mask here is asterisk t asterisk. Asterisk means any character, any or no character. So in this particular case we are listing all objects where first name has T symbol anywhere in it. So let's see whether we have any one of them. Yes, we have two objects. One is Otis and second is Boston. As you can see, the names contain T in each one of them. So that's like it. Thank you for watching and have a good time.